is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 376. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from sure to be frigid Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how are you, sir?
Well, first of all, it's been like 70 degrees here, so it's great.
What?
And Denver's great.
Wait, it's warmer there than here?
Yes, Denver just has weird weather, but I walked home from work today, for example. So, taste it.
Wow, okay.
And otherwise, I guess, I don't know, the world turns.
Yes, that it does. Whether we approve or not, it just keeps on rolling. And of course, that means another week goes by and another Limited Resources podcast comes to your ears. Of course, I'll start off by mentioning our sponsor, channelfireball.com. What an honor it is to be associated with Channel Fireball. They have the same values and the same reasoning on their content side, as we do, which is they know that what you want is to get better at Magic. I mean, come on, that's what you come here for. There's plenty of podcasts about Magic that you can listen if you want to, get some entertainment or feeling like you're hanging out or whatever. And while we do try to keep things entertaining on the show, we have a bottom line here, and that's get you better at this game. Because when you go to your local shop and you want to play, it's more fun if you can win and if you're actively improving. That's what feels good. That's what Luis and I are motivated by, is by improving at things and learning new things. And if you go to channelfireball.com on their content side, you're going to have a lot of content that's going to actively help you do that. We're talking about some of the best players in the game, Reed Duco and Turnwald, pumping out fantastic top tier content. And you just can't get this. It's so hard. Like, imagine any other sport. You can't just go, to the best football player and be like, I want to know exactly how to throw a great ball. You're just never going to get that from them. And here you get weekly, videos, articles, and all that kind of stuff for free on Channel Fireball that are going to help you get better. How great is that? And while you're there, of course, they sell Magic cards. You can get anything you need, Magic related, including supplies. You can get Limited Resources stuff there too. They were awesome with me with that too. So you can go to their store and the supply section. You can find sleeves and deck boxes and t-shirts for LR if you want to show what a connoisseur of value you are. You can check that out there too. And of course, single seal product and all that kind of stuff too, all at channelfireball.com. Please do check them out. If you want to support the show directly, you can do so. Patreon. This is a website that came out kind of in the wake of Kickstarter that allows you to give back to the content creators that make things that make your day a little better, that make your life a little better sometimes. And this is kind of the new way that things work. It's a really cool site. And I like I said, patreon.com/limited resources, and it gives you access to a whole bunch of neat things. One of them is the question of the week, which I'm going to read right now, but also I'll do some sneaky stuff. I'll put some other stuff in there. For example, today, the entire show is going to be Aether Revolt questions answered. And I put a thread up earlier today and I said, hey, patrons, put your questions here about Aether Revolt because I want to know what you guys think. I mean, this show is for you. And this is a way that you can directly let us know what kind of problems you're having in Aether Revolt, what you think about it so far, what kind of questions you want to answer. We're going to go over a bunch of those on the show this week. This one comes from Jesse. And this one's not Aether Revolt specific, so I figured we'd pull this one out for our question of the week. It says, I'm a pretty new player to Magic. I play all the time with my friend, maybe 3 to 5 hours a day. Oof. Jesse's got it bad. But Jesse says, I play in drafts only about 2 times a month. And every time I play, I choke because of nerves. I forget triggers and even some of the very basics of Magic. Do you have any advice on how to deal with nerves? Do you remember back to that time, Luis, when you were not confident, about your play skill and your knowledge of the game and how you dealt with kind of getting over that?
I actually am not super.
I mean, it was in the 1800s, but.
Well, I'm not super useful to answer what that felt like because I don't remember ever having that.
Okay.
But what I can say is that dealing with nerves is very important because you do have to play all your matches as if they were the same, whether it's in front of 0 people or 10,000 people because they're watching, the feature match stream at the Pro Tour or what have you. And I guess practice is the biggest part of it. Everyone I know who got through this did it just the saying, act like you've been there before. Mm-hmm. Just take that into heart. Act like you've been there before. Fake it till you make it. Even if you feel nerves, just don't show it. And just tell yourself you don't feel it, and you kind of get there. That's how most people seem to work anyway.
Yeah, it's funny what I did early on, because one thing that I realized that was tangibly screwing me up, because I had the same experience. I actually started playing a tiny bit live, and then Magic Online was actually where I was really introduced to the game. And so when I would go to my local card shop for an F&M or for a Sunday draft, I didn't know anybody. And on top of it, playing live Magic was a little foreign to me at the time. I wasn't really as comfortable with everything, because online, yes, it was punishing if I screwed up, but at least I knew exactly what was happening. I could read the log, or I could just look at the game state. And when it came to live, it was like people use all these shortcuts, and I wasn't really ever able to fully get my head around what was going on. And so I'd need to ask questions. But one of the things that did pop up from time to time was that people played much quicker than I did live. And this was for two reasons. One was that they were used to it. And two was that they had been playing for a long time and I hadn't. I was still very much learning the ins and outs of Magic in general. And one thing that I did is I slowed down. I just said, because what I would do, and I don't know if this is just a natural psychological thing or whatever, but I would try to play to however fast they were playing. I don't know why. Like, it didn't make any sense to do that. I just would.
I've got to say, that's like one of the bigger advantages I get, even though like at the Pro Tour is so great.
Really?
Well, I mean, you've seen me play. Like I play.
Yeah, you play
fast.
lightning fast. Yeah,
and
I mean, you like actually have to slow yourself down. You know.
Actually, I was asked to slow down by the coverage before.
Yeah, when you're playing against Shota or somebody.
Yeah, me and Shota Yasuko were going to play in the top 8 of I guess it's Shadows over Innistrad, and they asked us before our match to play slower because like we both just play so fast. But
I remember that.
What the funny thing that does is it does exactly what you just described. Is I will play fast, and then my opponents will like play faster than their normal pace of play, which actually is like a pretty big advantage to me because they just have less time to think. So don't let your opponent's pace of play inform yours, even though it's kind of hard not to, which is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the idea here is just to be aware of that and go, wait a minute. I would remember this trigger. It's just that I was like rushing through and drawing my card and not really thinking about stuff. Also, the one other piece of advice that I have is to don't be afraid to use the little tricks that people use. For example, if you do have a trigger on your upkeep, put something on top of your library, just a dice or something like that. And then when you go to reach for your card, because you forgot your trigger, you'll go, why is that dice? Oh, right, trigger. And you're not in your draw step in it and it works perfectly fine. Don't be afraid to do that stuff. Like, it's much worse to miss a trigger than to feel a little silly for having to do a physical reminder like that. Thank you, Jesse, and good luck with it. I mean, the other thing that we should mention here is, of course, it gets better. Like, the more you do it, the more you'll get better at it. But this is a time that's important for you when you're learning how to play in that kind of stuff, and you should get through it. Okay. We've got an Aether Revolt Crack-A-Pack here from Blair. Thank you, Blair, for donating that pack to me at a GP. It's very kind of you. All right. So we've got Hinterland Drake. That's the 2 and a blue 2/3 flyer that can't block artifact creatures. Fine card, not a first pick, I hope. Conviction. We've got a question about this a little bit later. That's the 1 and a white aura that gives a creature +1/+3, and you can pay a white to return Conviction to its owner's hand. Also not a first pick. Gear per Osprey, 2 and a white 2/2 flyer. All right. Nothing's really stood out to you, right, Luis? I'm kind of cruising through here, but.
Just let me know when we get to something that's a
like
first pick.
Something that's remotely playable. Here's Defiant Salvager, 2 and a black 2/2. And you can sacrifice an artifact or creature to put a +1/+1 counter on it at sorcery speed. A decent card, but another one I don't want to actually first pick. Oh, here's a Prey Upon. I like that guy. That's
the leader right now, though not something I'd be very happy about.
Agreed. Renegade's Getaway. I'm not even going to read it. Because we're not picking it. We're not playing it. I don't like it at all. Ice Over. So 1 and a blue aura. You can enchant an artifact or creature, and it doesn't untap during its controller's untap step.
Worse than Prey Upon, though a playable card.
It's playable, right? Yeah. Implement of Combustion. Looked so bad when we first saw it, but this thing routinely sees play now. This is the red implement. 1 mana to cast. Red, sack it. It does a damage to a player, and you draw a card.
The implements are better than they look, and I think this is actually the best implement, because the red decks tend to have more improvise going on than, even though the green implement of Ferocity, I think is like power level, just straight up power level wise, the best one probably. But I think the implement of Combustion is the most valuable one. It's still not a card I would take over Prey Upon, though it's actually closer than it looks.
Yeah, man, this pack is bad. Aegis Automaton is next. That's the 2-mana 0/3, and you can pay 4 and a white to return a creature you control to its owner's hand, or I should say another creature. All right, that brings us to... All right, let's get to the uncommons. We should get something good here. How about Cogwork Assembler? 3 mana, 2/3. You can pay 7 mana to make a token of target artifact. It gains haste, and you sack it at the beginning of the next end step. Is that better than Prey Upon?
I would rather just have Prey Upon, even though it is colorless, which is nice. I would still just start with Prey Upon. I think the Assembler is pretty niche. It's just a fine card. It's just nothing that exciting.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it.
I've just never felt like paying 7 for this ability was something I wanted to do if I have anything else to do. Like last week we talked about when do you use activated abilities versus play cards from your hand. I would always play cards from my hand before using this, just about.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen people do dumb stuff, but it's rare. Wow. Yeah, the hit parade just keeps rolling here. Gonti's Machinations. Goodness sakes. Black.
Straight up unplayable.
Yeah, I'm just going to put it in unplayable pile. There's too many words to read. All right, well, here's something at least somewhat interesting, though. This card hasn't really proven to be amazing to me. Hidden Stockpile, black-white for an enchantment with Revolt. At the beginning of your end step, if you have Revolt, you get a servo, and you can pay 1 mana and sacrifice a creature to scry 1.
It's a gold card, which I'm reticent to first pick, though I do like this card. I think if you're playing these two colors, if you're playing black-white, you're going to play the card. It's just
for sure.
not a card I would first pick. This pack's pretty bad.
This pack is horrible. All right, we've got a foil. It's a common, but it's a decent one. It's Welder Automaton, the 2 mana 2/1, and you can pay 3 and a red to do a damage to a player.
I like Welder Automaton. I think that, again, because it casts Sweatworks Brawler on turn 3, I just tend to like the red Improvise enablers a lot more than others.
Yeah, same, and it's just a reasonable card. I'll put that in the maybe pile. Our rare is Merchant's Dockhand. This card's actually really cool. It's 1 mana for a 1/2. Yeah, you can pay 3 and a blue, tap it, and tap X untapped artifact you control, and you look at the top X cards of your library, put one of them in your hand, and the rest on the bottom in any order.
Yeah, I would take this. I think this card's good, and I think it has a higher upside than Prey Upon.
Yeah, definitely. This was the one that you and I talked about. I think it was during the set review, or maybe you and I were just chatting individually. But, I was like thinking to myself, well, do I don't know, 4 mana, like, do I need other artifacts or what's going on with this? And I think you, or I can't remember if it was you, but somebody just said, well, it's 4 mana, tap, draw a card. I'm like, oh, right. That's awesome. Like, I'll just take that.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I'll take the Merchant's Dockhand here. Well, all right, there is one other card in the pack, though. It's an Ethereum cell. Should we take that instead? Is that better than all these other?
If it costs 0, it would be a Lotus Petal, but I don't know that that's a card I'd be super happy with.
Also, it doesn't have a mana cost. Yeah, so I guess we can't take it. Okay, so we'll take the Dockhand and see where that leads us. All right, so let's get into our listener questions. There's a lot, they vary a lot. So we'll kind of be taking the ones more in depth that warrant it, and the quicker ones we'll just be answering here. The first one comes from Matthew Hall, who says, are any Revolt cards actively good? Is Revolt a trap?
Yes, there are some good Revolt cards. Vengeful Rebel is the one that springs to mind most for me. The 2 and a black 3/2 that Revolt gives a creature -3/-3.
Yeah, that card's good.
If you have this card in your deck, you're going to want to put a couple enablers into your deck because it's just a great payoff. Also, things like Lifecraft Cavalry, the 4 and a green 4/4 trample gets +2/+2 or 2++1 counters if you have Revolt. Like, you can play a deck with like 2 Cavalries and a Soulcleaver Elite and like Unbridled Growth and a Green Implement and a Renegade map, and it's fine. The problem in the deck and what we've been talking about is that the deck isn't there. Like, there's not a 6 enabler 5 Revolt card deck very often, and as such, you're not going to go all out on it. But individually, there are some good cards with Revolt.
Yeah, I mean, to answer the second question, is Revolt a trap? Kinda. What I mean by that is, if your plan is to draft a Revolt deck, yeah, that is kind of a trap, because we've talked about this quite a bit, and we'll talk about it again. Just the fact that the payoffs are so not that high, and the setup cost is kind of reasonably high. It just makes it so that, yes, you will occasionally get reasonable value from a Revolt card, especially one of the good ones, like you said, Vengeful Rebel. But beyond that, I kind of do think it's a trap. Like, if I handed you a deck and I said, this is a good Revolt deck, this does what the Revolt deck's trying to do, like, would you be excited about that?
Yeah, I'd be loath to call it a trap exactly, but I don't think you want to go super deep on it. So I don't know. That leaves it kind of in the middle for me, where like it's worth playing an Unbridled Growth and a Renegade map and a couple implements and just being okay with Revolt being sometimes on. It's not really worth trying to go all out. So I don't know if I'd call it a trap, though. I don't think I quite agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that is kind of a loaded word. Let's move on to the next one. It comes from Jonathan. It says, Marshall, seems like you've been struggling with this format and a lot of pros as well. Do you like that challenge? And this is interesting because it's funny. The way that my workflow works is that when the set comes out on Magic Online, I record a bunch of videos to get over to Channel Fireball. And I'm assuming that that's what Jonathan's referring to when he said I was struggling, because I did have some, oh man, I punted pretty hard on a couple of my videos. And I mean, I did fine. I think I like 1-1 and 2-1 a bunch of them or something like that. But I did feel like I was struggling, and it didn't normally, when the set first comes out, you're going through, the pre-releases and the competition level dips really strong as people come on Magic Online to play the new set, but the grinders, stick around for the long term. So normally I'm used to winning like a lot during those, and I certainly was having very mediocre results. So yes, I definitely did feel that. Do I like the challenge? I love it. My God, I love it. Like it almost feels not great if you kind of figure it out early, go in there and just smash everybody. And you're like, well, okay. I mean, it feels good to win always, but I love the fact that like, I still don't know how to, fully figure out these formats, even after having played limited for so many years now and thinking about it on the level that I think about it and talking to the people that I talk to about it. And it did make me feel better, I have to say too, that, going to the Pro Tour and talking to the pros and having them be like, I haven't won a draft in the format, or I can't figure out what the hell's going on here. That did give me a little bit of solace, but yeah, I love the challenge. Post question has been called here by Jonathan. He says, do you also enjoy the challenge of pretending LSV is the better player to boost his ego?
Well,
what does that even mean? I mean, I'd love to be able to enter the fray there, but I don't think that I really can. So sadly, Jonathan, I don't do that. And I don't think I would enjoy it anyway.
I mean, realistically, I'm in the Hall of Fame and have 8 Pro Tour top 8s, so.
Right. I mean, it's true, right?
You don't need to boost my ego. Look what I just said.
Well, like, and what am I supposed to do? Like, what am I supposed to be like? Well, I think I'm better at this than you. It's like, come on, like, let's just. I'm content with how good I am at the game. I mean, I would obviously always try to get better, but what I'm saying is, like, I don't think that I'm terrible at this game, but I'm not in the Hall of Fame, and I'm not on Luis's.
I will say this. Ben Stark, the guru of limited, someone who we talk about a lot, he has put you on the list of people who get limited, which, trust me, that list does not include a lot of platinum pros. So yeah. You should take some solace, and Hall of Famers, you should take some solace in that fact that
I'll take it.
There's a very big difference between getting limited and not getting limited, and Ben thinks you get limited.
Well,
so
that I'll take that all day. Next question. How do we handle this, Luis? Should we ignore this question?
We'll read the question, but we will not answer it. John says, you never got around to grading Scrap Trawler from your Rare and Mythic review, so what do you think about it? It's an interesting question.
That is an interesting question. The next one comes from Colin M. Chapman, who says, what cards could possibly make you ever play white? There was that's a very loaded question, right? Oh, yeah. I mean, Colin's making some major assumptions about the way that we think about white, or at least kind of subversively getting his point across that he does not like white. So
the only time I can remember even coming close to like flat refusing to play a color was green in Battle for Zendikar, where I still didn't think that it was like you should never play green. Owen Turtle, that was one of his first appearances on the show. Might have been his first appearance on the show, actually, where he vehemently disagreed and said you should never play green in Battle for Zendikar. That was the most extreme case I can remember, and even then I would still play green sometimes. Mm-hmm. I think that all the colors are very playable in Aether Revolt / Kaladesh Limited. Yes, some are better than others, but there's a lot of reasons to play white. I mean, Dawnfeather Eagle, Audacious Infiltrator, Caught in the Brights are all fine commons, and white tends to build some pretty decent aggressive decks. Like, I will say this. I will say white, black, and white, green aren't my favorite. So white pairs well with blue and red, which is fewer color combinations than other colors. So to Colin's point, yeah, I'm not looking to like if I saw a white card and a red card at the same power level, I would take the red card because I think red is better than white. But I'm not going to like, put an embargo on playing white. Like if I open a good white card, like I'm just going to take it. Like if I open SRAM or something, I'm just going to take SRAM and just draft some convictions.
Yeah, there you go. And by the way, Christian replied in the thread and said, the eagle, though. So, yes, which you just mentioned.
That eagle, though.
That eagle, though. Rob Bovell says, I really like Mobile Garrison. It does all kind of neat things, I think. My friends and the community at large doesn't seem to like it as much. Is it possible for a card to be better for someone based on their play style, card evaluation, skill level, etc., than a card is for someone else? What an interesting question. Because I don't really like Mobile Garrison that much. I find it very medium. But that is interesting, right? Like if one of the things we saw, Luis, you and I, when we went to the limited meeting from Team Channel Fireball Fire and Team Mutiny, was that they let some of the players kind of rearrange things the way that they would after having laid out the uncommons and stuff. And it was really interesting to see how some of the players valued certain cards drastically different than others. Does that make you think that there is something to be said for what Rob's proposing here?
I think it's overstated. I think that it is possible, but I think people crutch on that way more than they should. So it actually happens. It tends to happen more in Constructed, where people have like pet decks and they're like, well, this deck fits my playstyle. And it's like, well, yes, there is some element of truth where like, if you have 3 tier 1 decks, a control deck, an aggro deck, and a combo deck, and you love playing aggro, you should probably play the aggro deck. The problem, and this is what I think is misused, is what'll happen is there's a tier 1 control deck, a tier 1 combo deck, and like a tier 2 aggro deck. And it's like, well, I love playing aggro. It's like, yeah, but you should really play a different deck. The win percentage isn't there. Mm-hmm. For limited, I think, yeah, I mean, look, I'm actually like a kind of a poster child for like, yeah, I loved Hexplate Golem and Scars. I loved, like clunky finishers and control decks, even when it wasn't always right. And sometimes I had success with them, but I started winning more when I just started drafting what was right for the format. So don't pigeonhole yourself by saying like, well, I like this card for these reasons. I know it's not the best card, but it fits my playstyle. It's like, yes, that works to some degree, but overall your goal is to get to the point where you're just making the highest value plays. And that includes drafting the best cards or, in a vacuum, not like it's rare that there's going to be a very big difference between the card that you like to play with and the card that you should actually take. So it's really hard for me to imagine that this holds true if you practice enough.
It's really funny. I mean, because what your answer essentially is yes, that is a thing that people say, but you should view that almost as a weakness, as a leak. It's something you should fix, right? Like it's like saying that, no, that's not true in a vacuum. It's something that you should address.
Well, again, I'm going to go back to Constructed because it's a little easier to relate to this here, but I think it holds true for both. When people say like, so-and-so is the best white weenie player, yeah, that's a compliment, but that also means that person just plays a white weenie. Whereas like, I right now think Owen Turnwald's the best player. What decks is he going to play? He's going to play the best deck.
Right. No matter what it looks like. Yep.
He's going to play a combo deck if he thinks that's right. He's going to play an aggro deck if he thinks that's right. He's going to play a control deck if that's right. He's just going to get to pick the best deck. You want to be the person who makes the best value decisions. You don't want to be the person who's like, I'm the best beatdown drafter, so I just always draft beatdown. But it's like, well, sometimes your seed is just right to draft black-green control. You're like, yeah, but my style is beatdown. It's like, well, why don't you change your style to, the highest win percentage? That's the best style.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say that everyone has infinite time and resources and desire to master everything. Because, I mean, sure, you don't always. But you are artificially limiting yourself if you start to say things like, well, I just like drafting white and blue. It's like, yeah, but you can't always do that. And you're going to win less if you try to always draft it. And it's like, I always like this card. It's like, well, that's just not really how limited works. So I would be loath to agree with this.
Yeah, I find it interesting because it makes me think of a long-term approach versus a short-term approach, right? It's a Band-Aid. It's saying
definitely,
yeah, my win percentage will be higher in this draft if I draft the deck that I'm comfortable with, and that might be true for that one draft, or like you said, for the Constructed parallel, where you say my win percentage will be higher if I play this aggro deck because that's the deck I play, even if it's a tier 2 deck compared to tier 1 options. But that is not the way to improve over the long term, and so much of what we talk about on the show is really about long term improvement. So Rob, Put down that mobile garrison, buddy. It's not that good.
Well,
Andy Skinner. What?
You've got some renegade wheelsmiths.
Yeah, you can do some stuff. I'm not saying it's unplayable, but it isn't that good. Andy Skinner says, how playable is Conviction really? Is the answer, how many SRAMs do you have? Or like, I've had people bring it in. I'm assuming it came in out of the board. I don't know for sure, against my green-red decks. And I'm like, that's actually really annoying. Like, my burn spells don't work anymore. And like, even a lot of my fight spells don't kill some of the bigger creatures.
I actually think Conviction is just a fine card. I've come around on it.
You think it's D's?
Yeah, I do think it's D's. D's plus even. You can put one Conviction in most of your white decks and you'll be satisfied. Like, it just makes your creature big enough to rumble against almost anything. It's good enough flyer. It's good at blocker. And the disadvantage of auras is just less pronounced when you can just pay a white to return it in response to a removal spell. Yes, if you play this and then in response they bounce or kill your creature, you're out of luck. But for the most part, Conviction just does what it does what more of an equipment role than an aura role, and the mana cost is not prohibitive. So I've come around on this card. It looked like crap to me, but I think it's good. I mean, I don't think it's great, but I think you can play one and be okay with it.
Yeah, I've come around on it myself, mainly because other people played it against me, and I'm like, it's just annoying every time. Like, it's just good enough every time. The thing to be aware of is that, remember, it is that equipment style card that you need a certain amount of creature. You know, you want to be playing 15, 16, 17 creatures to make it worth your while. And it is taking an important slot in your deck that could be a removal spell or a better combat trick or something. So just balance that out when you play it. But it does seem to hold its own for sure. And then, you know, if you've got a SRAM or something, it goes up substantially. George Wright asks, what would you say the speed of this format is, where 1 is Zendikar, which for those that haven't played it, Zendikar is very fast, and 10 is Ice Age or Rise of the Eldrazi, which he's using to represent the other end of the scale, very slow. To follow up, why are some of the pros having such a hard time with this format? So we kind of already addressed that, but you know, we have had this format in our hands for a lot longer now, and you know, I always find it to be a little. I don't love putting just a number on it like this, because when I think of a fast format, I think that there are fast decks available. Now, I do like it when it comes to Zendikar, because that really was the way to play Zendikar, is that every color had evasive 2-drops. Every color wanted to beat down. Nobody could block. All the creatures were like bad blockers and good attackers. And that went basically across the board. When it comes to most sets, though, when we think of a fast format, it's because there is a fast deck or multiple fast decks viable. And that means that you are often going to be facing down a solid, good, fast deck. And that limits what you can do on the slow end of things with the 7-drops and that kind of stuff. That said, where do you come down on George's question if you had to put a number on it?
I would say it's like a 3. Maybe a 4.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It's fast. It's a fast format. Yeah. Like you can die very quickly. Vehicles are difficult to block.
I guess, and I kind of mentioned this on the show before, it's not just straight up that it's fast, because Zendikar is literally like 1 mana 2/1s and 2 mana 2/2 unblockables and whatever. It's also that control just isn't as good. So even though like Iron Tread Crusher is not going to kill you on turn 5, it's only gotten to attack once by then, but cards like that make it so the things you do in slow formats are less good. So it can be a little slower than the really fast formats while still punishing the slow decks.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at this next question. Jesse, actually, it's the same Jesse. It looks like he's put 2 questions in here. Or she.
Do you get to do that?
Sure. If they're good questions, Jesse, and I think they look fine. So Jesse says, you guys are so down on Revolt. Because 1, the payoff is not that great, and 2, it's so difficult to trigger. I feel like you guys are forgetting Delirium and how difficult it was to achieve in Limited. In comparison, Revolt is much easier to achieve with rewards that are pretty good. And yes, some of them are not great, Jesse says. This is less of a question, just me trying to get you guys to be not so down on Revolt. So I do have a rebuttal to this claim by Jesse. When it came to Delirium, I felt like Delirium was it was a cleaner design, in the sense that when we played Delirium cards, we knew what our game plan was, and that was for the game to go long. We knew that we wanted to get some cards in our graveyard naturally through playing limited, and then maybe play a few, Vessel of Nascency or whatever it was that we picked up to help kind of move things in that direction. But no matter what, we knew our deck was slow, and we were looking for payoffs. Like the Turbo Delirium decks of that format ended up not being super great. It was a better mechanic if you were willing to have payoffs down the line. And that jived with what you were trying to do. So you drafted your deck to be slow, and you knew that the longer the game went, the higher the chance you had Delirium, and then the higher the chance you got to get the bonuses from Delirium. With Revolt, there's no real rhyme or reason. It's like, can you enable Revolt? And you need certain types of cards to be able to do that. And then occasionally you can, of course, through normal means of magic. But for the most part, if you're trying to do Revolt stuff, you need puzzle knots and you need maps and, did I say puzzle knots? I meant implements, but puzzle knots too. Yeah, and maps and that kind of stuff. And then you can make that happen, but that isn't necessarily a cohesive game plan. That's just, well, I happen to draw my enabler and my payoff, which happens sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. So I think that the comparison is a little off, just because I felt like Delirium was more in line with what we were trying to do from a deck level perspective.
Yeah, I think that part of it was, like you said, you need to draw a Revolt enabler and a Revolt card at the same time. And it turns out, like, if you're going to miss your 5th land drop, you have to sack Renegade Map. If you don't have anything to do, you're going to want to sack one of your implements because you're just going to sit with a card in play. And that just means when you top deck a Revolt card 4 turns later, it just doesn't do anything. Mm-hmm. Whereas Delirium, once it's on, it basically was on. Like, that didn't go away. So you crack your Vessel of Nascency, and then all of a sudden you're just like at Delirium, and then the whole rest of the game, while your Delirium cards are just great.
Yeah.
And
much bigger payoff, yeah.
Yeah, it also just seemed like you got more Delirium cards and they were more impactful. So
yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jesse, for the additional question. You sneaky one, you. Harry.
Well, technically not a question.
True. In fact, they even said this is less of a question and more of they're trying to persuade us. All right, fair enough. Harry says, hi, Marshall and Luis. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about Winding Constrictor. Absolutely. I've played against Winding Constrictor decks, and I've seen them played at F&M a couple of times. And sometimes, if the right cards are drawn, the deck is brutal. But oftentimes, the deck is far too slow and can be neutralized by a basic aggro deck. I was wondering about your thoughts and experiences with the card in the deck. Thanks for your time. To me, Harry, Winding Constrictor, assuming that, it's in your colors and you're not going crazy trying to splash it or whatever, is what we call a free roll. It's the type of card. I think your description was apt, but I think that your conclusion was not, which is basically what I'm saying is that Winding Constrictor is fine on its own. It's 2 mana, 2/3. And even if you don't get it down on turn 2, it's okay to play it on turn 3 or turn 4 and still have a reasonable body. And the times when it goes off, it's absurd. And as you described, Harry, you said it's brutal. And I agree. And yes, sometimes the deck ends up performing slowly, or you don't get the synergies going, and you can lose to an aggro deck. But my contention is that was not the Winding Constrictor's fault. The Winding Constrictor itself was sitting there ready to just be completely absurd or demand a removal spell or whatever. And, if it turned out that the time that you played it, you got ran over, well, I wouldn't blame the snake. I think that that's the type of card that you want to play as many of as you can, because it gives you a very reasonable floor, like we like to call it on the show, but the ceiling is insane. And those are the type of cards that you want as many of as you can get in your deck as possible.
Yeah, Winding Constrictor is just one of the best cards in the set.
Yeah, it's completely absurd.
It's centerpiece of a constructed deck.
Yeah, multiple, it turns out. Dylan Nelkin says, what's the better way to draft the improvised decks? Prioritize the enablers like Servo Schematic or the implements, or the payoffs like Bash and Inventor and Rage Giant, that kind of card. What do you think about that, Luis? Because that was one of the questions we had coming in was, when do you pick what? I think the baseline logic would be, I want to make sure I have my payoffs, and then I'll pick up the enablers later. But it turns out people have recognized quite strongly that the enablers are something that you need to get. So how do you approach that?
I still think the payoffs are more important, just because you need both, but there are more different enablers than payoffs, because enablers are just any artifact that costs 2 or less mana, whereas payoffs are just these specific cards with Improvise. Was it 3 commons and then a couple uncommons, not counting the rares?
Yeah, so there wasn't that much.
No, there's like Bastard Inventor, Sweatworks Brawler, and Fen Hauler, and then in Rage Giant, I'm not counting Foundry Assembler, the 5 mana 3/3.
Yeah, that was a flop.
I think that card sucks. but Enraged Giant and the Barricade Breaker at uncommon. So unless I'm missing another one. So, the Windkin Raiders, the blue, the 4/3 flyer.
Yeah.
So that's 3 uncommons and 3 commons, which is a decent amount, but it's not insane. And there's none in Kaladesh besides Gear Seeker Serpent, which kind of counts. But Kaladesh has a lot of cheap artifacts. So yeah, I would say you prioritize the enablers. Once you have if
you mean the payoffs?
Or sorry, the payoffs. Mm-hmm. If 5 picks in, you have Bastion Inventor, 2 Sweatworks Brawlers. Yes, at that point I would probably take an Implement of Combustion over another Sweatworks Brawler. But for the most part, the payoffs are the cards you need to start with.
Yeah, I do. I always wish too, by the way, thinking about this deck, that there was maybe one more payout. I wish the Foundry guy was better, or that there was just a little more punch to those. Because I think Sweatworks Brawler's really good. I think Bastion Inventor is solid. I like the uncommons quite a bit. But man, I always just find myself wanting just a little more. By example, I went over during the Pro Tour and I looked at, I think it was Ben Stark's draft deck, and I said, well, how did it come out? I like to check in on Ben. He's just my favorite player, to check in with his draft deck and get his thoughts. And he said basically that he just was a couple of payoffs short, and it was he had all the he could go completely nuts in the early stages with cheap artifacts and just power these things out. But he needed 2 more or maybe even a third payoff to really make his deck great. And it's man, I do just wish that you would be rewarded a little more for the risk that you take, because that does happen sometimes, that you go for it and you're set up and you've got all of pack 2 to pick up all the Sweatworks Brawlers, and then just kind of none of them come along, so that is a thing. And yes, Gear Seeker Serpent is pretty insane in those decks too. Tyler says, hey guys, love the show. It brightens up my commute once a week. Glad to hear that, Tyler. And enjoying this format. He says, even though it seems mostly correct to always be aggro in Aether Revolt, what would it take for you guys to move in a more nonsense-based deck like efficient construction, mechanized production, hidden stockpile? Any validity to these strategies, or do we just need to wait until the format gets stale? Well put, Tyler. Tyler knows that we're going to draft these at some point, but he's asking, should we?
But we won't recommend that on the show, if it's not right. I think of the 3 cards you mentioned, I mean, obviously, Tyler's just throwing some examples out there. I like efficient construction more than mechanized production or hidden stockpile. But
really,
regardless, yeah,
man, I like mechanized production way better than. In fact, I put efficient construction 3rd on that list.
I just loved trying to go off with Thopters.
Yeah, and trust me, I do too. And I did. I think we did on stream or something. I can't remember what I was doing, and I went completely nuts. My opponent scooped to it, but I was also running 3 of them.
Well, I think that you can you're going to build your deck around that card, whereas the other 2 cards are cards you just put in decks. But
that's true. That's true.
Regardless, yes, I do think aggro tends to be better than this stuff. It's going to be. I think, again, Tyler, mostly correct is, I think, a good way to describe it. Mostly correct does not mean always correct. Sometimes you will want to draft nonsense decks, and sometimes those decks will work out. But your baseline should be drafting aggro.
I think so, too. I just can't in good conscience say, no, there's real power here, to these efficient construction decks. I just think you're just going to get completely ran over by any reasonable aggro deck. Zach Webb is next. Zach says, blue is always open. Are the blue cards really that bad? I can consistently pick up decent blue commons for my last 7 picks in almost every pack. What gives? Is it worse than I think?
I don't think blue is that bad. I think it's
medium.
I think it's playable. Blue suffers from something that it actually often suffers from. It turns out blue tends to not get great commons. I think part of it is it's not going to have the marquee red burn spell, black removal spell type card. And this format is in fact particularly hostile to blue's kind of quote unquote removal, which is ice over, in Aether Revolt or Malfunction Kaladesh, where there's just a lot of cards that happen to punish those just auras that stay in play. Mm-hmm. So blue's sometimes Claustrophobia is the 1 blue, tap down a creature forever card. That card tends to be among the best commons when it shows up. It just so happens that this set does not lend itself well to that being a good effect, because there are cards that self-bounce and flicker your own creatures.
Yeah, many of them.
So that makes blue a little worse baseline, and then just blue's commons are not that exciting. So That means that blue tends to be drafted a little less, but I still think it's playable. Bastion Inventor's a good card. I mean, I do, and I think Hinterland Drake's a fine card too.
Okay, yeah, I do too. I found blue to be reasonable. Ether Swooper, etc. David asks, or doesn't ask, says, I've been really struggling with this format. Some of it's variance, I'm sure, but some of it must be me misunderstanding how it works. And he says, for the record, I'm about 40% in matches through about 60 matches. And he says he was 60% in matches in Kaladesh Limited. So a big drop for David here. So he says, so I guess I have two questions. First, my aggro decks don't feel fast enough. Should I be prioritizing 2 and good 3 drops even higher than I am, basically even over removal? Are the best aggro creatures that important in this set? How do you think about that question? I still take removal over them, but
yeah, it's interesting. The removal isn't great, though. I like, the cheap removal is very good. Like Shock, for example, I think is nice and efficient. But in general, I think that the creatures are more replaceable than the removal. So yeah, I mean, even though the removal is not super efficient, I would still usually take removal to begin with. The high tier creatures like Ether Chaser, for example, the 2/1 first strike for 1 in a red, like that is going to be better than removal most of the time. But for the most part, you would rather have a removal spell than just like, Gear per Osprey or Hinterland Drake or whatever.
Mm-hmm. David also says, and this is a much more broad question. He says, how do you reset when you feel like you're just stuck in a rut on a format? What do you do? Because your routine's a little different, I think, than most, because like a lot of it's around the Pro Tour and stuff like that.
I have definitely gotten there. When you're stuck in a rut, what I find that most likely what that means is that you've started to overvalue particular, or at least for me, particular cards or strategies. You end up like, if you really like blue-green, like I'll get into a place where like, I think I'm trying to be open, but I like the blue and the green cards just like a little bit more than I should. I just always end up blue-green because I always think it's open. There, I just try to reset and just like go into a draft without, like recalibrate by like just going back to what I think the best cards are and know that I have this bias. But when you say stuck in a rut, like you're just drafting and just never winning, that can be harder. I think looking at draft videos and looking at like pick orders and stuff that other people have,
yes, can
help challenge your expectations. I know we always look like whenever there's like an article on Channel Fireball, our official limited resources sponsor. Whenever there's an article about pick orders, I will read it. Like when Frank Karsten posts their team's pick orders or Paulo posts their team's pick orders. And recently Paul Tian just posted the limited meeting that actually we were attending, the CFP Fire limited meeting.
Yeah, the heavily edited.
Yeah, they ended up, a lot of people who weren't me were swearing, I hear.
Yeah, right. Let's just say Paul sent me some screenshots of what he edited out.
Oh yeah.
You were in all of them.
Yeah, as an innocent bystander. But yeah. by looking at what other people are doing, you can get some new interesting information, and that might help break you out of this particular rut. Also, realize sometimes you just lose 14 out of your 16 last matches. Like, yes. That can just happen. Like, I've had drafts where I just bricked 5 drafts in a row. Like, it just happens to everyone.
It does, yeah. And it doesn't really make you feel better, but it does help to know that you're not, the only one that happens. And I like your advice a lot about kind of like doubling down on the studying aspect of it. That always makes me feel better. And the other thing I'll do is like, man, if Cube is up or if there's just some other format that I like to draft, I'll draft that and just sort of get a reset so that when I come back to the one that's giving me trouble, I feel like I have a little bit of a refresher. You could also take a break, but come on, who does that? Okay, we got one more question here from Jaeger. Jaeger says, Improvise. In an improvised focused deck, what is a healthy ratio of 1 and 2 cost artifacts to cards with Improvise? And then what are your thoughts on an all-in style improvised decks, like with roughly 10 to 12 1-drop artifacts, 1 or 2-drop artifacts, and 6 to 8 improvised cards? Thanks. Those don't really happen, do they?
I have not really seen that occur where you're just like 14 land affinity. Like that's just not.
Yeah.
Really
I mean, my thought is if you can get it, that sounds really sweet, but it's just hard to pick up the numbers that he's talking about there. But what about his first question? In an improvised focus deck, what's a healthy ratio of those cheap artifacts to the cards with Improvise? From what I've seen, it's like, payoff cards, people, are usually aiming for the 4 to 6 range, to be happy with that. Like, that's like, sweet, we did it. If you can get up to that level. And then I don't know. I mean, how many 1 or 2 do you want in that deck? 5, 6, 7, something like that?
I would say like around 7 or so. And bear in mind that like 3-drop artifacts kind of count too. Because if you play like a 2-drop artifact and a 3-drop artifact, you can play a turn 4 Bastion Inventor, and that's good. So I would say like, the vicinity of like 6 to 8 1 and 2 drops, though you would take more if they're good, clearly. And then, 3 or 4 more artifacts that go a little further up the curve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not exact. It's just you want like, I mean, I think like a 2-to-1 ratio is pretty good, right? Of like the cheap cards versus the expensive cards. Mm-hmm. So like that, you would rather draw Sweatworks Brawler or Bastion Inventor and like 2 1-drops than to draw 2 Bastion Inventors and 1 1-drop.
It's fun. I mean, also, it is not often that you get to pick, like oftentimes the amount of payoffs you want is as many as you can get because you're only getting them from 2 packs. And like we outlined earlier, there's not actually as many improvised payoffs as you might think, especially at common. So, you're kind of just snatching them up whenever you can. And the really good, cheap artifacts, same thing. Like they tend to go relatively quickly. And so, you oftentimes are just limited by that. There was a couple of cards I wanted to talk about before we sign off today as well, Luis, that I just wanted to kind of touch back on again. Where are you at on Pacification Array? How much do you like it?
I've been pretty happy with the card. So this is the 1-mana artifact. You can pay 2 and tap it to tap target artifact or creature. It's great, like excellent in an improvised deck because it's an improvised enabler, but also just has an effect on the late game. I think it's actually a pretty solid card outside of that, just because it can handle the biggest threat at a time, and the cost is not so prohibitive. There's just not that many ways to spend your mana after about turn 6 or so in this format. Despite the fact that there's like the automaton cycle, they're just like kind of low power level. So Pacification Array is a good way to sink some mana in.
Yeah. I found it to be a really interesting card to play with. And I found that people tend to, I think everybody thinks it's pretty good, but people have a wide range on how good they actually think it is. Some people love the card. And I think most are closer to where you're at, where it's like good, cheap, pickable, improvise enabler with that scales well. It works a little weird against vehicles, but whatever. Really thought it was going to be great against vehicles. But then they just don't crew their vehicles. So like, really know how I'm supposed to parse that. Like, is it just like an Oblivion Ring for their vehicle? Because because you can't use it. Like,
but then you end up not needing to spend the mana. So you're kind of trading 1 for 1, right? Your 1-drop Pacification Array is shutting down their 4-mana Iron Tread Crusher, and that's just fine.
Well, but it's your 1-drop Pacification Array and your 2 lands.
You do have to leave the lands up, but once you're at a stage in the game where that's not a huge cost, then that ends up working out. Yeah,
it does. And plus, if you're being aggressive, you can always do the end step tap, main phase tap, and get rid of their 2 good blockers and then bash on them. So I've been impressed by that too. Consulate Dreadnought. We got to talk about Consulate Dreadnought.
Okay.
Because this is one that you and I bashed. We did not like it when we saw it, and it has really performed well, I think, for most people. Can you break down what you like or dislike about Consulate Dreadnought? This is, by the way, the 1-mana 7/11 vehicle with Cruise 6.
The part I dislike is like the part that we immediately latched on, which is just often it just sits and play doing nothing. The part that I do like is, again, it's a cheap artifact for Improvise, which gives it additional context. And it turns out 3 is a good number for power in this format because of Iron Tread Crusher as well. So a lot of your like aggro decks will just have a lot of 3-power creatures naturally, which means that you can end up crewing this more often than you might think. And it only costs 1 mana, just in play for free, basically.
Mm-hmm. That's the key, right? Like, the description that you and I heard was comparing it to Ardara Express, right? Yeah. Which is, a card that is like, I'm struggling with how to exactly put it. So basically, if Ardara Express cost 1, would you play it?
Yes, I think that is a good comparison. I think, yes, I would be much more likely to be like, okay, you're not giving up a turn to play it. It's just coming into play.
Yeah, for effectively free.
And it just upgrades the creatures you crew into it.
And it does significantly as well. Right? I mean, that is a big deal. Like let's say you have 2 3/2s. Those attack okay, but a 7/11 attacks way better than that, right? I mean, it's such a problem for your opponent because they could easily put 3 creatures in front of it and still not have enough toughness to actually kill it. Let alone any combat tricks, removal spells, or whatever. It's also a good blocker. I mean, if what attacks through a 7/11? Like, just nothing. So, yeah, I think the card's way better than we thought.
I think you're not going to block very often with it because you have to leave back probably 2 creatures to crew it. But it does give you some great attacks,
Yeah. I don't know. I think that it's just better than we thought. Like, it might just be good.
Yeah, it doesn't fit into any deck, or every deck rather, but the decks where you do want it, where you have a lot of 3-power creatures, I actually think, yes, it is legit good.
Yeah. When we were at the Pro Tour, I went up to Huey and said, hey, how's your deck? And he had 2 of them. And I said, how do you feel about these? And he's like, great. He had drafted a bunch of 3-powered creatures to accommodate it, but he felt really good about it. So, yeah, when he says that, I'm like, all right, well, I need to look at this card again. The last one is the Iron Tread Crusher, which we may have talked about, but I just want to touch on again. I definitely have it bumped up a notch from where I had it before. It just seems to smash hard enough to be worth the crew cost.
Yeah, I think it's a card which I think I've found integral to a lot of your like aggro decks. It's nothing. It's not. I don't want to say it's like a high pick over a lot of like the high tier commons, but it seemed to be worth including often enough and often enough good that maybe it is more important than your random creatures.
Yeah. And the thing is, again, this cares a lot about the crew cost being 3. It cares a lot about 3-powered creatures, of which there are plenty of in the format. And it really does significantly boost them. I mean, you brought up something I thought was really insightful when we were doing the Kaladesh stuff, talking about vehicles, about being like, well, how much better is the thing that you're sending over than the creatures would have been on their own? And in this case, it's like twice as good. I mean, it's, you're using 2 cards to get it, but it's a 6/6. It's very, very difficult to get within combat.
You're paying 4 mana for a 6/6. Normally you pay 4 mana for like a 3/3 or a 3/4, right?
Yeah.
Like 4 mana 3/4 is just medium per Kata Club security. Mm-hmm. But you're getting a 6/6 instead at the cost of one of your other 3-power creatures. So you are, I think, overall making out slightly on that deal.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it pulls its weight enough, especially as a common, right? It's not some dominant force in the format, but I kind of had it a little lower. Like I had it as like the too expensive equipment realm, the one where it's like, I can see this could be okay, but you just now end up not really playing it. But
it's a little better than that.
But it is a little better than that, I think, in the end. Okay, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you to our patrons who asked questions. I appreciate that, and I think that leveraging the Patreon to talk to you directly is really cool. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to put questions in to the thread for us. And of course, for our normal question of the week thread, which you get access to as well when you're a patron. Also want to thank our sponsor, channelfireball.com. Make sure you check them out if you need anything Magic related, including selling your cards. This is one I like to harp on because I know how expensive Magic can be. I know that this hobby is not cheap and that, you want to keep playing and keep drafting and it can be difficult. And, a lot of times what happens is you do a draft and you end up with rares, and these rares are like not enough to go into a constructed deck or build a constructed deck, but they're also like, maybe they just get jammed into your trade binder until they're worthless. And it's like, stop that cycle. You can sell these cards back to Channel Fireball. They'll even give you a 30% bonus on the trade in. And, you can use that if you're trading it in to buy all types of, booster packs, all that kind of stuff to keep that train rolling. And it's just a good efficiency measure to do that. And CFB, it's good for CFB too, because they get to, keep their inventory up on stock as well. So please do check them out, channelfireball.com, for all of your Magic needs. If you need anything, if you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com, including links to all of our content. Basically, it's all there right on the front page, as well as the full archive of all of the shows. When I moved over to the website, we'd already done hundreds of shows, and I painstakingly moved every single file by hand so that I could have the full archive, and it's all there. That means you can go back in time. You can listen to episodes from way back when we first started in 2009, when we were terrible still, and you can listen to John Laux and Brian Wong, Ryan Spain. All the old school episodes are still up there too. If you're going to do a flashback draft, you can find the set review for the one that you're going to do. And lots of free content there for you on lrcast.com. All right, that's going to do it for the show. Oh, You got
I was
something
just going to say that's how I use it to find and re-listen to the old episodes.
I know you don't do that. Like, you don't lie.
You don't know that.
What's your favorite old episode, Luis? What's the one that stood out to you the most? I know there's a lot in your mind right now, but
the quadrant theory one.
All right, that is actually a really good answer. That is one of my favorites. You're a bastard. I can't believe you just came up with that. Anyway, that's going to do it for the show this week. We'll see you next week. Okay, Luis.
What you got for me?
So, it is time, once again, for Let's Stump Vargas. I've got 2 booster packs here. We're going to start with this one. This is Morning Tide.
I will say, this segment has become one of my favorite, and that's why we're doing it more often, because I just very much enjoy it.
Oh, it's great, and everybody loves it. I love it, too. All right.
Morning Tide? God,
Morning Tide. So what's the over-under on Morning Tide for you? There are 15 cards in this
This
deck.
is so weird. Like, somehow I think I might know Visions better than I know Morning Tide, and Visions was 20 years ago, and Morning Tide was like 8 years ago.
Everything in here is like Ballybrush, Stony Brook,
I know,
whatever. It's all this tribal nonsense.
10 and a half.
Okay, 10 and a half. I'm going to take I'm looking at the pack, by the way.
All right, you get to have a little more information. Right?
Take the under.
Okay.
I think you're going to choke here. This one's easy, though. Warspike Changeling.
Oh, 3 and a red, 3/3 Changeling, and you can pay a red to give it first strike.
Yeah, that was a good card. That card always did well. Violet Paul. Not Paul.
Yes. God. I know
We got him.
Like purple or something, but
we got him.
Is this like no? This 2 and a black. Give a creature death touch instant. Draw a card.
This is 4 and a black. Tribal instant fairy.
Kill a dude, get a 1/1 or something. Like
Yeah, that's right. Destroy target non-black creature. Wrong, put a 1/1 black fairy rogue. Ooh, 50-50, huh? Distant Melody.
Oh, this one's easy. This is a sorcery, 3 and a blue. Choose a creature type. Draw a card for each creature of that type.
How is that easy? I mean,
you're right. You do not know how many decks Raptors made with this card.
Oh, okay.
Such a bad card. But.
Okay, that makes sense. This one should be easy too. It's Fertilid. Do you remember that one?
Yes, this is 2 and a green for a 0/0, and it gets 2+1 counters. You can pay 1 and a green turn and remove a counter to search for a basic. Put it in play tapped.
Yes. I take it back. That was not easy. There was a lot of text on Fertilid. I just remember being a pretty good card. All right. You're 3 to the good and 1 to the bad here. Here we go. Ballyrush Banneret. Part of a cycle of Bannerets.
Yeah, I think this is the Kithkin one. It is.
I will tell you, it is the Kithkin one.
1 in a white. All your Kithkin and soldiers cost 1 less. I want to say it's a 1/3.
Oh, so close. It's a 2/1.
Oh.
God, everything else you said was right.
So do I get credit or
no?
Oh god, we're grading. This is a
dude. Power and toughness is a key stat.
Okay, fine.
Stony Brook Banneret.
All right, this one I do know because I actually played with this and constructed. 1 in a blue, 1/1 Merfolk. Make all your Merfolk and Wizards cost 1 less. And I think it has Island Walk.
Ooh, it does. Yeah. I thought you might forget Island Walk. All right, how about Shine Wind?
Jesus Christ.
Legit never seen this card.
I think this is 2 and a white 0/0 comes with 2+1 counters. 1 and a white, remove 1, destroy an enchantment.
God, do I have to give you credit for this? So you're so close. So it's 1 and a white 0/0 flying, and it gets 1+1/+1 counter, and everything else you said is true. I'm giving it to you.
How do I get credit for this and not the Ballyrush Band?
Because you remembered all the really hard stuff.
Okay. Well, this is weird grading, but since you're saying I'm getting credit all out.
Well, it's up to me. I'm the judge here.
Right.
Fester Creep.
This is a weird one too.
This is how people describe you when you're not around.
Yeah, I'm the Fester Creep.
Yeah. You want a hint? It's an elemental.
Yeah, this is another one of those stupid 0/0s.
It is. You're right.
I don't remember anything else about it. I think it gives -1/-1 to things, but I don't really remember.
That is it. That's it. Just guess at the rest.
Is it I want to call it a 6-mana 4/4?
No, it's 1 and a black. 0/0 with 1 counter. Yeah. All right. You're not getting that one.
No.
How about this is, by the way, a good descriptor of this less Scott-Vargas, Hostile Realm.
Hostile Realm. I don't even know what this card is.
I've never seen it.
Is this the rare?
No, I'm going in order.
Oh, okay. I don't know what Hostile Realm is
it's
at all.
2 and a red
Uh-huh.
for an enchantment aura, enchant land.
Okay.
Enchanted land has tap. Target creature can't block this turn. Ugh.
Wow. It's very rare that there's a card I just do not know in any way, shape, or form.
That one probably didn't make the cut in many of your draft decks. Coordinated Barrage.
I'm so bad at Morningtide.
This is insane.
This is embarrassing. Is this like 1 red instant deal damage equal number of creatures, or like the creature type you control?
You are close. It's white. Instant. Choose a creature type. It deals damage to target attacking or blocking creature. Equal number of creatures of the permanent.
Close, but not quite there.
Not quite there. Nightshade Schemers. Jesus, this set is absurd for this. Every card has all this text, and it's
whatever. I'm just conceding. Do you have another pack? We could just go to another pack.
All right, we'll go to another pack. This is great. We actually stumped Vargas.
This is the first time I feel completely defeated. Morningtide just crushed me.
This is the first time that you have been. I can't believe it was Morningtide that took you down. Also, for the rare giveaway, we picked up a Kinsbale Border Guard, which I don't think is going to go into too many people's decks, and a foil Swell of Courage. So
I don't even know what Kinsbale Border Guard is.
Let me read it. Yeah, I don't know either. 1 white, 1/1. It comes into play with a +1/+1 counter for each Kithkin you control. It's also a Kithkin.
Dies, you get a 1/1 Kithkin for each counter on it.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So whatever, that'll go in the pile here. I'll probably give that away next week. I've got enough stuff in there now. All right. We did it. We stumped Vargas, and I can't wait. This one, I don't know how it's going to go. So the first thing is, I don't actually know what set this is.
Ooh, okay.
It just says core set advanced on the front.
Oh, dear Lord. Okay.
Now, here's the good news. These are all reprints, because at the time, whatever core set this is, it was made entirely of reprints. They didn't put new cards in the core set. The bad news is they just picked them haphazardly, so this could be real bad. And we'll see after I open the pack what set this actually is, because it doesn't say on the front, which is weird. Oh, crap, it's white bordered.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, it's hideous.
What's the set symbol?
8. It's 8th edition.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know 8th. 12 and a half. I actually know 13 and a half.
I'm going to take the over. I think that you know these cards. These are like, I have confidence in you.
These cards.
I have good confidence in you.
I have to make up for the Morningtide debacle.
Yeah, that's right. But which, by the way, I called. Dehydration.
3 in a blue or a creature doesn't untap.
God, these cards are hideous, but they're white bordered. They're horrendous.
I actually played kind of a lot of 8th.
All right. Oh, here's a stumper. How about Grizzly Bears?
One in a green tutu.
All right, here's a weird. I don't know this one off the top of my head. Okay, it makes sense. It's called Severed Legion.
1 black, 2/2 fear.
Yes, that is correct. Avon Flock.
4 and a white, 2/3 flying. Pay white to give it +0/+1 till end of turn.
You got it. How about Balduvian Barbarians?
1 red, 3/2.
Oh God, you are running this up. Mana Link.
1 in a blue, counter spell unless they pay 3.
Panic Attack.
2 in a red, up to 3 creatures can't block this turn.
Jesus. Sacred Nectar.
1 in a white, gain 4 life.
Wow, this card's bad. You were right.
Yeah, it's not good.
Mind Rot.
2 in a black, target player discards 2 cards.
Elvish Pioneer. What is this? I don't actually know this one.
Green for a 1/2, and when you play it, you can play another land.
How hard should I be on you here? You missed 2 minor details. If you tell them both to me right now, I will give you credit. If you tell me not one or neither, then you get no credit for Elvish Pioneer. By the way, you rattled off 9 in a row to start this pack.
Where's the minor details I'm missing on Elvish Pioneer?
Okay, I'll tell you.
Okay.
First off, the power and toughness was wrong.
Oh, it's a 1/1?
That's right.
Okay.
And the second one, you were close on the ability, but not quite.
It's not when you play it?
It is when it comes into play.
Oh, that's what I said.
I know.
So you can play another land. What does it not do?
Tapped.
Tapped. Oh, it's tapped?
Tapped, yes.
Oh, come on.
No, gotcha.
Fine.
This is me after I lose a match. Saltmarsh.
It's come to play tap, blue-black land.
Yeah. Pyroclasm.
1 and a red, deal sorcery, deal 2 to every creature.
Finhorn Elder.
2 and a green for a 1/1, and it taps for 2 green.
That's correct. This is somehow in between the uncommons and the rare. It's Swamp. I'm not going to make you read that one. Oh, sweet. This is great. We got Lurgoyf.
Ooh, this is the original Goyf. It's
Yeah.
2 green for a 0/1, and it's ++1 for each creature in the graveyard.
God, it's so hideous. Man, nice work.
Runs the Lurgoyf.
Yeah, that's what it says. Sophie Eriksdotter, last words. I said that. I did an interview recently, and I remembered that I literally had made a deck before I played, when I played back in the day, named that. I had written on the deck box, Akhan's Run. It was some Lurgoyf deck. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So I got 14 right?
You got 13 right.
13 right?
Yeah, it looks like there's 14 cards in here because they counted the swamp as like an actual card.
Oh, but that counts as a card. So.
Okay, then actually, if that's the case, then you got that right. So yes, you did get 14. Woof. Yeah. And the only thing you missed was that it was tapped. Wow, that was impressive. Yeah, I knew you were going to hit the over on that. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this Lurgoyf in the giveaway and try to send it away as quickly as possible because, dear God, I just can't even look at these cards. They're hideous. I just threw them in the garbage. Nice job, Luis. You redeemed yourself.
Yeah, I got pretty owned on Morning Tide, but what can you do? I guess practice your morning tiding.